Hey everybody, Card Dreamer here, coming at you on behalf of D Class Derailed and all things D Class related. And today I wanted to take the opportunity to talk about another franchise that I'm passionate about, specifically a character within it, and that would be Star Trek's Commander Data, or more accurately, Star Trek The Next Generation's Commander Data. And the reason I thought this would be an interesting topic is because not too long ago, I'd actually kind of went on a Trek data binge, kind of unintentionally as well. So I was in the middle of reading a series of the Next Generation books dealing with data post Nemesis. So this is going to be a lot of spoiler warnings. I just want to give everybody a heads up now. I'm going to spoil a part of Nemesis, which if you haven't seen by now, then you're not going to watch anyway. I'm going to be spoiling things from some of the books, and I'm going to be spoiling things with Star Trek Picard, as well as something with the comics. So, like, every medium is going to have some kind of spoiler, so just FYI right off the bat. Having said that, for those who don't know, Data died near the end of Nemesis. And that was it. Stayed dead. Uh, he died. He died to save Captain Picard and ultimately the crew of the Enterprise and the galaxy. Because Data was awesome, and he's one of my favorite characters. But as I was saying, I was reading some books, and they dealt with bringing Commander Data back to life. And I know you're like, well, how do you do that? He blew up. And so, well, now you know why I was so intrigued by that notion. It's because I didn't think there was anything left of him. So, how do you? Right? So, the first book is actually does take place just prior to Nemesis, actually. And it deals with Data and it's and this being that actually Kirk met, um, who I think it was at one point Leonardo da Vinci, and he's an immortal basically. And I obviously missed an episode of the original series, so I'm gonna have to go back and see this. But long story short, obsessed with cybernetics and new Data's creator, and there's a whole story about those two and or there's some journey they were on and discoveries and so forth. But Data became a part of that and so forth. So it was kind of a prelude to things to come. And of course, then Data dies in Nemesis. Then after Nemesis, there's a trilogy of books called Cold Equations. Book one was called The Persistence of Memory. Book two was Silent Weapons, and book three was The Body Electric. And these quite heavily, at least the first book, I should say, quite heavily followed Data's creator Noonien Singh. Noonien Sung. Uh, Singh was Khan. But anyway, it really dealt with his long history, getting to understand what Dr. Sung was going through, how he escaped his death, and well, supposed death from the Next Generation episode, uh, where Data gets to meet him, talks about why there's an android at Data's mother, talks about a lot of different things, how Sung kept up with Data in his career, all sorts of things. So, and then of course he finds out how Data died. So he was determined to bring back Data. And he builds himself out, but he also manages to put himself in an android body, which is a whole kind of related to that very first book. He gets himself into an android body that's superior to Data as we knew him, and then builds a new android body that's even more superior that was meant for Data, and then that gets destroyed. And um, I don't want to go through like really a whole lot of the books because I think they're worth reading. But he does manage to. So there's also another android that was introduced in Nemesis called B4, who was a predecessor or precursor to Data, precursor to Lore, even, Lore being Data's brother. And um, he was very primitive in technology compared to Data and all. And Sung knew that. Sung knew there wasn't too much more he could do with him, but Sung thought of them all. Son, he wanted to save him. He knew Lore couldn't be saved. But so something comes up in the stories where B4 is on the brink of suffering this cascade failure. He's about to basically internally be destroyed because in the movie Nemesis, Data had uploaded his memory engrams and to B4, but B4 can't handle them. B4 was never meant to handle the complexity that Data could. It wasn't just the memory engrams. I think it was also all his subroutines. I mean, just everything Data had learned and known, he gave to B4. But B4 was never, like I said, wasn't designed for it, so he was suffering failure. So there was a time on that. And Sung manages to recover those things, and of course, at the last second, finds Data, gets Data, and transfers Data's consciousness into a new android, or well, Sung's android body, and of course, Sung basically sacrificing himself through Data. So, long story short, after that, Data is back. He's got Sung's body. He's got way more features and abilities, all sorts of cool things. Um, he's no longer part of Starfleet, though. He's a civilian. He decides to retire from Starfleet, and the other two books deal with other adventures that sit with that in the children. So the first book brings Data back. Second one is hard to it's hard to explain. I know it ultimately deals with this machine that Wesley finds. Yeah, that's right. Wesley Crusher even comes back. Um, oh no, well, Data goes on a journey to find actually the Leonardo da Vinci person, and he wants to bring his daughter Lol back. If you all remember that character, so he hunts down the person that can do that, the one that helps, that's immortal, and falls in love with his android daughter, which happened to be introduced in the first book called Immortal Coil. Uh, these are all interwoven. Believe it or not, Immortal Coil is written by Jeffrey Lang. The trilogy is written by David Mack, and then there's a book that goes after us by Jeffrey Lang that ties even more together. It's wild, like how much is being tied together. But so even Data is a citizen. He joins his art, manages to get wrapped up in this artificial AI think tank with all these different AIs, a lot of which um, have been encounters from previous treks, including a couple from the original series, which was kind of neat, um, and so forth. And there's this AI Death Starish type of thing that's destroying the galaxy. Wesley discovers Q can't interfere, so Q tells him to go bother Picard. It becomes this great big mission, and by the end of the trilogy, Data, it literally the last page I think is Data reviving Lol. So come the next book by Jeffrey Lang called The Light Fantastic. Data's still not returned. He's happy to be retired. He wants to focus on being a father and so forth. And there's this big mission or big adventure because Lowell eventually gets kidnapped by Professor Moriarty, who manages to escape the Holocube, which actually was well written. That I didn't that was pretty good. But yeah, so this is tying into a lot of stuff. But long story short, yeah, Lowell's back, Dave's back. He's got his family, and it's really interesting because a lot of people who like Data, well, anybody like that, a good part of it's his wanting to become human, understand humanity, which he's still actually struggling to learn in a different way now, but also part of the Starfleet morale. It's interesting that the show, The Next Generation, has Data or the Starfleet as his moral compass, and he was in honor of, Data joined because it was honor of the people who rescued him and found him on that planet. And yet in these books, it's like, oh, Sung really didn't care for Starfleet and didn't like that Data was a member of it. So Data decided to honor his father and not do it. And Data's Data, but not really Data. So yeah, there's actually this argument in the series, the trilogy of books, basically with LaForge, because LaForge misses his best friend, and Data's still trying to understand if he really is Data, or if he's even the same Data. Because even though he's got all the memories, they stop at the time he uploaded his memories to B4 in Nemesis. He doesn't remember his death. He doesn't remember the things after that. He knows he can look them up, but he didn't experience them. And of course, now he's got all his father's memories and motion. He's got everything, and he really isn't sure if he's really Data or a copy of Data. It's a really interesting moral thing that I'm not sure that he ever truly comes to grips with. So that's the books. That's the novels. Then you have the comics, which I didn't read, but I found out about. Which there was one that's a precursor actually to the apparently ties together two different things: the Star Trek Online game, and there is a tie into the Star Trek Picard TV series. It was supposed to be prelude, but got negated. Um, but long story short, in the comics, Data is back, but there was no big to do about it. Basically, his memory and programming managed to overwrite before, and Data was just back to who he was, nothing lost. It really was that simple. The writers just said, "The heck with before, bring back Data." And then you have Star Trek Picard, the TV series. And that one gave Data's death, for all the flaws in that show, and that's going to be another discussion podcast. But without getting too much on the tangent, for all the flaws that show had, and even though it was called Star Trek Picard, this is just as much a Data story. And this one doesn't really bring Data back. There is an essence of Data. There is uh, Data lives on in a different way. He lives on through daughters he doesn't even know he had. They weren't ones he created, but they are his daughters, created out of a single neuron. It seems a little far fetched, but anyway, it's Data's daughters. He has two of them, and but also there's this journey of recovering, or at least kind of going on a recovery. In the end, that you find Data's consciousness was somewhat restored. His consciousness, what's left of his memory that they could reconstruct, his essence, his being, is stored in this big, complex quantum simulation. But he ends up dying. So instead of getting a body and coming back and whatever, being restored, he basically says, "I don't, let me go." He tells Picard, "Let me go. Please pull the plug on this." And it's a very touching, emotional ending. Like, I cried. I shed a tear or two. I'll admit it. It was very well done. So now we've laid out these three different possibilities with Data. It's really sad that there are these three different possibilities, honestly. So one thing I don't like with Trek is that they don't try to have a cohesive canon like Star Wars tried. Um, the comics are their own continuity, the books are their own, and the shows, movies are their own. I, I get it and I don't get it. So let me address the comic book one right first because I think that'll be the easiest one. I hated it. I don't like it at all. I think that's a slap in the face to what before was as a character in person. You've kind of watered down Data because B4's body isn't able to be what Data's was. It just scientifically wasn't as advanced. So regardless of subroutines and all, physically it's just inferior. But I think that's a slap in, like I said, slap in the face to B4 as a character, and there was no big to do about it, so it was kind of like nobody cared. And I just Data was back. That's all that mattered. I just didn't like that. I thought that was really weak, lame, and lazy writing, honestly. Then you have what they did in Star Trek Picard, and while I think it was very beautiful and well done, it was also too late. I feel like Nemesis came out so long ago that I mean doing it now just seems kind of pointless. I just don't feel like there was a need to do it at this juncture. If they had done this story earlier, oh my gosh, that's fine. That would have been perfect if they had done it sooner to Nemesis. Because, like I said, Data's story is beautiful in this, and I really enjoyed it. The best part of Star Trek Picard is Data. Just remember that. Um, but yeah, so then you have the books, and the books. As much as I hated the comics, I was just disappointed in the timing with the show. The one that has the most detail, the most story, the most adventure is the one that disappointed me the most because I don't like Data out of Starfleet. That's the one thing with the books that really disappointed me is Data away from his friends, Data away from Starfleet, and and the things he built his life on and these honors that he achieved in Starfleet. And I don't like that he was taken out of that. Like it doesn't work for me. And I understand characters grow. Don't get me wrong. You want a character to grow, evolve. That is what a part of all of who Data was. He wanted to be human. He wanted the things humans have, and that includes a life, offspring, raising this family, retiring. I get that. And someone with his abilities has a lot of different challenges to look forward to. I get that on a logical mental state, like mentally I get it, but it's just not where I want to see Data. And I would have been neat to have Lowell in the starship with him. She could have learned her lessons that way. Maybe not as a grandiose adventure as she had, but I think it could have been done. It could have been done well, giving us somewhat the Data that we enjoyed. The philosophical debate if is he or is he not Data was an interesting one, but I think fell a little flat because I didn't feel the debate was quite there. This just wasn't the Data we knew and love. It's weird. Part of what we loved about a character is his drive to be something. So when you give him what he strives for all this time, to me, that's where it should end. Because it's no longer the character that you love. So if that makes sense, I don't know. It's a very interesting dynamic to think about. I would really love to hear your guys' opinions for anybody who's a fan of these things, of Star Trek and of Data, and who's either seen Picard or watched the movies or read the books or the comics. I want to know what your opinion is on this on Data because again, like He's one of my favorites, and I'm not sure he was handled well in any of the mediums for different reasons. I mean, like I said, Picard was beautifully handled, but just seems so late in the game. Now, I don't know if there's any other books. I'm sure there is, but I don't know if there's been any other books dealing with Data since the Light Fantastic. I would need to look it up, but and if there are, I certainly will read them. But it was just interesting that it was never intentional to really um, read these books and binge watch Picard, because I binge watched that like 2 days after the final episode aired. So I mean, like, this was a big data string. I kind of burnt myself out on it, to be honest. Um, Not that they were bad. It just was not expecting to do it at all. So that pretty much is going to wrap up the discussion. I mean, I kind of gave everybody my opinions and thoughts on it. I think the comic was just cheap and lazy, and a complete disregard for another character's existence. Um, the books, I'm not sure. It kind of like the Light Fantastic ends with the possibility of Data becoming a detective, more joining Professor Moriarty, the hologram from the Next Generation episodes, as a detective or in an adventure. Like that was actually a good story. Like dealing with Moriarty, like the way they did in this, made sense, and I liked it. But it's interesting to see. It would be interesting to see Data as a detective, but you know, it's just another tread on his love for Sherlock Holmes. I get it. I don't think it's needed, but we'll see. I could be wrong. I would like to see him back in Starfleet. I really would. Having said all that, guys, I really would love to get all your opinions and feedback. Please feel free to message me on YouTube, or if you're listening to this through the podcast, leave a voice message, or feel free to contact me on Twitter and direct message me and send me your opinion. I would love it. If I get enough, definitely could do a follow-up discussion on this. Just sharing people's thoughts. But anyway, thank you all for listening. I greatly appreciate it. Again, I'm Card Dreamer. This has been D Class Derailed and a discussion on Star Trek's The Next Generation's Data. And until next time, guys, stay evil.